everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Dead City review. So this is my breakdown of episode 4. So obviously this will contain spoilers for the episode. And this episode really focused a lot on Bruegel. I mean, he was really the main character, I would say, of the episode. We learned a lot more about his personality, a lot of, I guess what the group is like, and also some stuff about the character that, I'm really curious on where things are going to go for the next episode now, based off of the trailer for episode 5. And yeah, there was a scene here towards the end that was interesting. Anyways, we'll get into that here. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. I will be doing my members video next, so stay tuned for that if you are a member of the channel anyways. And yeah, I have some stuff that I do want to talk about, some I guess pretty awesome stuff. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And also I will be doing my episode 5 trailer breakdown later on, as well as a video later on tonight. So yeah, just stay tuned for all of that here, but let's get into the episode. So Bruegel is a very interesting character. I think going into the episode, I was curious on how the character was just gonna, I didn't really know what to expect. And so I think watching the episode and seeing what the character brings to The Walking Dead, it's honestly incredible. I think a lot of the tension, especially between Bruegel and the Croat in this episode felt like, oh, like this is actually incredible. Like if Bruegel killed the Croat in that scene, and I'll talk about that in a second, but if he actually did, that'd be such a crazy entrance for the character here. But the thing is, obviously, the story doesn't make a lot of sense to do that right now because, they all have to join an alliance, right? And so it makes no sense to get into that right now. But I do think that's eventually happening in the future just because the Croat and Bruegel don't seem to get along at all. They do not like each other. And it's really interesting how this played out overall. So Dama and everyone go to visit Bruegel, and that's how the episode starts. And it really is just that's the episode for the most part. It's all set in that one location. It begins with them going there, and it ends with all of them leaving, right? So that's what I really like about how these episodes are structured overall, is there's certain sets or certain areas that they're all going to be a part of for an episode. And that reminds me a lot of The Walking Dead, where you would just have this episode is going to take place in this building because they're on a supply run. And so they're going to this building here. And the whole episode is just basically this supply run to this building, right? It was very simple like that. And this really reminded me of that, where it was just they're going to, I guess, a museum here. I don't know if that was a museum or not, but they're basically just going there. And that is the whole episode overall, right? Obviously, they did go to other locations. You are seeing other, I guess, places there in New York City. But for the most part, that is the main location. And that was kind of cool because, again, it reminded me of just old Walking Dead. You had these certain areas that the story would be set in, right? If you think about the Clear episode with Rick and Morgan, it was basically you saw them traveling a little bit, but they basically arrived at a location and the episode was just there, right? And so it ends with them leaving. It was really similar in that way. Obviously not the story or anything like that. The story was different. Actually, if anything, tonight's episode reminded me of the Governor a lot. Bruegel really gives me Governor vibes. And I think it's probably because obviously he has a walker, or I guess it wasn't a walker, but yeah, we'll get into that. But it reminded me of the walker tanks or whatever from season 3. But yeah, anyways, the other story which does combine with this story here is we do see Maggie, Pearlie, and Hershel. They want to go and see Negan because they need information on what's going on with the methane and everything. And I think they just want to find out more of where it is specifically. And I will say I like the fact that they got that information. They literally just went there. Maggie saw Negan and he told her about where it is. It's at the cathedral. So we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of episodes here, because we're halfway through the season now, which feels so nice. And so they know where to go now, right? And I like the fact that we have clarification on that storyline now. It's just yeah, New Babylon, Maggie and etc. are just going to be going to, I guess, the cathedral now to get the methane and whatnot, or take over the whole place, basically, I think is what they're planning to do. And so what happens next, we'll have to wait and see. But now we know what they're doing. It's not just this mission of oh, we're going to go there and try find something, right? It's no, that they actually know where to go now and what to do. So that was kind of nice. I did like the fact that we actually got that out of this episode here. Bruegel versus the Croat was really interesting. I think that, the dynamic between the characters, Bruegel was making fun of the Croat. The Croat, I felt I really feel he gets jealous whenever people are too nice to Dama, because it just seems like whenever people are, very nice to her, or if she's very like happy for some reason and it's because of like Bruegel or, someone else, like the Croat seems to get very jealous about the whole situation, and he starts like analyzing everything, trying to find any issue with Bruegel to bring up in front of Dama, almost to make him seem a little bit more useful or more like, I don't know. That's sort of the way I read the scene anyways, is it did seem like he got jealous quite a bit. And obviously he did notice the thing with the walker. And it's funny because I will say, I mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. I mentioned how that walker didn't look like a walker, and that maybe this is how Bruegel is getting a lot of, his resources, is it's an actual person in there, because it just seemed really like it didn't make a lot of sense for the walkers to fight in that sense. Like for walkers to fight in that way, and just the way that walker was fighting, I was like, there has to be somebody dressed up like a walker there. And that was the reveal in this episode. So that was kind of cool. We do see the new group again, called the Foragers. And I will say a really interesting group, and they are still here, and it looks like in episode 5, they're still going to be there as well. I feel like the group could just get wiped out though in episode 5. We'll see what happens, but there's a big battle that's going to happen there. Maybe there's a character or two from the group that joins Maggie, but something's happening here in episode 5. And I do like the fact that this group has been a part of this season this much, because if the group, and the group, by the way, is called the Foragers, if they were just like a part of the show for episode 3 and that was it, like, it would feel like a really random episode. And I remember mentioning in my review, like, it was cool to see them, but I hope we see them again in the future. And we've gotten them every episode since then. It looks like episode 5, we're also going to see them as well. So I think they might get wiped out in this episode, or maybe 1 or 2 people, survive. But it looks like Bruegel is actually going to go after the place here, and we'll see where this goes, but the season is definitely picking up. I like what Negan says here in this episode, where he's like, oh, I'm more of a movie poster kind of guy. He's not into like the artwork and all that stuff. He just likes movie posters. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm the same. Like I can appreciate, all of the artwork and everything. And I'm sure it looks really incredible. But to me, a really cool movie poster is just like, oh, there you go. That's what I have up on my walls, right? Is like movie posters and stuff. So yeah, I totally understood that. Hershel, I thought this scene was actually really nice. He doesn't even know what a fire alarm is. He asks, he's like, what's a fire alarm? And then Pearlie's like, well, you like pull it down and like, whatever. He had to explain the whole thing, and he just never really got it. Like, he just didn't really understand what the whole thing was. And then they were talking about candy and like chocolate bars and whatnot, like what food they missed from the old world. And Maggie tells the story of, like a Kit Kat or something like that. And she remembers, the last time that she ever had a chocolate bar or anything like that was like 3 years in. And so Glenn, surprised her with one. And looking back on when that would have happened, well, All Out War happens about 2 years in. So that would have been around, obviously after All Out War, which makes no sense because Glenn was dead at that point, right? And so I think that they just kind of, got mixed up with the timeline there. That's the thing with the show. And that's why I always say, like, in terms of the timeline and trying to see where things are playing out overall, you can't just look at like, oh, this thing happened in this year or whatever. Like, it's sort of just in general, right? Like what they're saying now is All Out War happened about maybe, 3 years in. So to me, that makes a lot more sense. You're adding more years, I would say, to the apocalypse, and especially more years to the first 8 seasons, right? Which I think makes a lot of sense because Carl was a lot older, right? So I think that's actually really smart. Like, there's no way 2 years happened between season 1 and season 8. Like, Carl grew up so much, and that's been a complaint for a long time. So saying that, Glenn got Maggie a chocolate bar like 3 years in, that would make it like what? I mean, you could probably say around season 5 or 6. Maybe she's actually referencing a specific episode that I'm not remembering right now, but I think that that actually works overall. And I'm not going to criticize, the fact they kind of messed up the timeline there a little bit, because I think that I prefer this. I prefer to add more years to seasons 1 to 8, because again, like there's no way that's 2 years right there. Like, that's just crazy to me. We also learn a little bit more about Dama and her backstory. And so she was a movie critic. She was like the biggest movie critic in New York City. And I guess there was something that happened where she like bit someone or something like that. And so, I mean, yeah, I guess that was her backstory overall. And I watched the episode Insider, and Eli Jornet, who is the showrunner for Dead City, or at least for season 1 and season 2. Obviously for season 3, there's going to be a new showrunner, it seems like. But he was mentioning that that was always the backstory there. And so I'm curious as to how that's going to make sense going forward and how it's going to matter to the story, because I feel like we never got the full story as to what happened there and like, you know, how it builds up the character and like who she is. So I think that there is going to be something that does happen here in the next couple of episodes. But yeah, I think we're learning a little bit more information here and there. And yeah, she was a movie critic. The Croat, like I was saying before, is suspicious of Bruegel's champion because he thinks that he's using methane or something like that to basically amp up these walkers. And so almost creating like variant walkers, right? Which, I mean, he was, I guess, obviously wrong about. It was an actual person. He's not actually like using methane or anything like that. But the one thing that was just really crazy about the scene was just like, no one likes each other. Like Bruegel wants methane. The Croat gets mad about that. And I was just like, you know what? He's dying soon. Like the second that he stood up to him, I was like, there's no way that's going to be like totally fine, you know, going forward. I think that at some point Bruegel is going to get rid of him. I just don't see the character surviving now. After that scene, I was just like, oh, there's too much tension there. There's too much built up now between him and Bruegel. And I'm just curious as to where all that's going to go here. But yeah, I will say all the Walker champion stuff was really interesting. I think that for a lot of that, I mean, it was really cool to see. It reminded me a lot of, I guess, again, I got a lot of like Governor, you know, vibes from this episode. Like there was just a lot of that. And then Bruegel's room, obviously, well, at first it seems like he has a walker like in his room that he has captive. And so it was just like the whole story there really reminded me a lot of the Governor. Maggie as well. So there's another part here before we get into the very ending of the episode here. So Maggie actually talks to Hershel about the Firefly story. And I found this very, very, I guess it's kind of sad, but there's a lot of truth to it. So she asks him, like, what do you remember about the whole Firefly story and everything? And Hershel remembers it totally different in a way, right? Like, obviously they both remember it being very happy. And it was a really cool, you know, mother and son moment overall. But Hershel says that, like, Maggie just wasn't happy all the time, you know, back then. And she was always crying all the time. And I guess when Hershel got back, he noticed that Maggie was crying, and he actually mentions like, oh, you said I was 5 or 6 years old, but I was actually older than that. And so it's just interesting because, you know, and then also Hershel says he wanted to do something special for her. And so that's just sort of how all of that played out there. And so it's something that like I found kind of sad because, you know, I guess as a parent, whenever you go through hard things, this and that, like you might not realize, you know, if you are stressed out that, you know, your kids can see that. Right. And so it's one of those things where it's just like how you remember it and how you see it all. They're probably going to see it totally differently. Like they're going to see it in this moment here. You know, Maggie asks Hershel about it, and that's like what he remembers about it. And Maggie kind of starts crying about that because it was something that I think she thought was just way more amazing, this and that. But she didn't realize that Hershel was noticing everything. Hershel noticed that she was crying all the time and always very, very sad. It's just something that, I guess for me personally, I got a lot more sympathy for the character. Like Maggie is doing this all on her own, right? And she doesn't have Glenn there or anything like that. Like it's just something that I think for her, it's hard. It's hard to do everything that she's doing all by herself. And I think that she's trying her best. She's doing her best. But there's a lot of stuff that she went through when Negan did what he did that I think for me personally, like I get it. I understand it. I get why she has been in pain for so long, why she's been so upset for so long. It's not something you're just going to get over after a season or two, right? Like I think a lot of people just want the characters to get over that. I think the way they handled Maggie's story and how they've told her story since Glenn died makes a lot of sense. It made sense to me, like overall, even to this point, like she's not going to get over something like that. Like that was insane what she went through, and having to see that person around forever and everything, like it makes sense. And I think now, you know, seeing what the characters are going through, that's where things are starting to change a little bit because she is starting to get over some of this here. And, you know, Maggie and Negan, there is something that she needs from him, I feel like, and I don't know what it is. And it was a really cool scene because she does do the savior whistle, and obviously not a lot of people are going to know that whistle or recognize it right away. But Negan was just like, oh, okay, what is that? And I think he knew that it was Maggie. And so we actually see them reunite. They talk about whatever. And yeah, she wants to know where the methane is, and he doesn't want to tell her. But then eventually he does. And, you know, I think that their interaction there was something that, like, it was a lot more, I mean, I don't know. I thought Maggie would be a little bit nicer to him, but I guess she was more stressed out about the fact that, oh, she's seeing him with Lucille for the first time in a really long time. And there was probably a lot of things that she was feeling overall, but she just wanted that information and just wanted to leave, right? And so things are going more and more in a positive direction. And I'm just so curious about the scene where Maggie has Lucille. Like, why does she have Lucille? What does that mean for the story? And how does that change how she is with Negan? Like, I wonder if she understands, more of, I guess, where he's coming from overall. And like, maybe she kills Dama and all that. And that's the whole thing here too. Like, well, Negan actually tells Maggie, like, you can't trust Hershel. And that's where Maggie gets really upset. And I get it. Like, someone telling you, oh, you can't trust your kid. Like, Maggie's like, wait, what? Like, she got so mad about that. Like, obviously you're going to get really upset about that. And then Hershel actually sees Dama, and it's like, I don't know what happened there afterwards, but, you definitely can't trust him. I think that Maggie just can't. And so afterwards, like, she wanted to question him a little bit, but, I mean, obviously it's the end of the episode. You can't get into too much story there, right? Like, the episode's already getting pretty long at that point, so that'll be an episode 5 thing most likely, but yeah, I thought the whole thing was really cool. The Walker battle, and obviously Bruegel wins and whatnot, and a really interesting scene happens here. So Negan actually whispers something to Bruegel, and it seemed like, at first I was like, oh, what is this about? But it kind of seemed like maybe it was more about the fact that he knows that his Walker champion is actually like an actual person, right? And so maybe he was like, all right, I'll back off on some of that. I'll you guys can keep your methane and all that, and I'll just join your alliance. But I think he told him something else as well, because Bruegel mentioned something at the very end of the episode that he has, something else that he can do or something like that. I can't remember exactly what he said, but I was just like, there's something else that he said. And I do think that Dama and the Croat definitely cannot trust Negan. And I'm curious as to where this is going to go, because I thought that Bruegel and Negan were going to really not get along. I imagine the story could still go in directions like that. Obviously, you can kind of see how maybe things, I guess play out like that overall. But Bruegel, I feel like, is maybe somebody that Negan could trust a little bit more than Dama and the Croat, because they're literally always bringing up his family all the time. And maybe if Bruegel is in a position where, he's the one that has all the methane and everything like that, then maybe that helps Negan out overall, right? So I'm curious as to where that's going and what he said to him, because I don't think it was just about the Walker. I think there was more to it there. I think he probably said that as well, but there was something else he said there because of what Bruegel mentioned at the very, end of the episode here. But yeah, I guess I'll leave it here, though. I think this episode was absolutely incredible. I think definitely, it's probably the best episode of the season so far, for sure, just because there's a lot more stuff that actually happened. You met Bruegel, and I see everyone saying this episode was really incredible and stuff, so I imagine that, the reviews for this one here is going to be, a lot better. I think the first 3 episodes were just a lot of like build up for the story, and now things are starting to pay off here a little bit more. And yeah, I think that meeting Bruegel, seeing where the story is now, I'm curious as to where things are going to go for episode 5, because it looks like there's a lot that actually happens in that episode based off that trailer, which I will break down in a second here. So yeah, anyways, I'm going to leave it here. Definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.